Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. My name's Lee Perry, and today we're doing a legislative breakdown. We're talking to Matt Grocholske, the president of the Florida Progressive Caucus. We're talking to Ethan Temple, who is a part of the legislative team with Sunrise Movement Orlando. And we're talking to Xiani Caucus, who works with the Young Democrats of Orange County. We're going to be breaking down different legislative bills that are working through legislative session right now in Tallahassee that are actively taking away our rights every single day, as well as doing an overview of different races to keep your eye on here in the state of Florida, especially after a very special election just took place in Texas that made huge waves. Take a listen to the breakdown. I got some of the coolest, most politically focused young people in Orange County here at the table with me. We got Ethan, Matt, and Xiani. Say hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Ujo.
My favorite part of having young people on the podcast is that they always are underestimated, but they actually are very, very politically plugged in. You guys are actually who I call when I'm frantically panicking about election results or don't know anything about a candidate and I want all the, drama and background, or Tallahassee is raining hellfire on us and I need information on different bills that are taking away my rights every single day. You all are the ones that are actively paying attention to that. And when I am in political spaces, young people are usually not there. And that really frustrates me, which is the whole reason why I created a podcast, is that, I get to, talk to candidates and elected officials, but the root of it is I want young people to see their own selves reflected in these conversations. And I also want to give a microphone to those who are kind of becoming politically active to save their own future. And that is you guys, right? Every single time I talk to you, it's like I can feel that you're so plugged in, and I feel guilty because you shouldn't have to be. You should be young. I mean, can we just go around and just say how old we are?
I'm 21.
I'm also 21.
I'm 22.
Okay, so when I was 21 and 22, I was doing shots of tequila and partying on top of a bar and didn't know the difference between state, local, and municipal government. And now I'm 35 and I'm calling these three to find out information on how things are actively moving in our politics. And so that's why I want people who are watching to respect you guys and to look at you as leaders in our local community. And I also want young people that are scared to approach politics to see you as leaders and to want to be like you and want to get to know you. So today, in the lens of wanting to inspire people and educate people, we're going to get a little deep on bills that are moving through Tallahassee and candidates that we should keep an eye on and different races that are important this session. This election cycle. And I really want to, talk about it, but also keep in mind that those that are watching might not be as politically plugged in. So we got to break things down for folks and make it fun, because even though it's scary and really sad, we are fighting it, right? Us at this table, we are fighting it. So first, let's start with some quick introductions with Ethan. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and why you do it.
And I regret sitting in this particular chair, but all right. So for those who don't know me, I'm Ethan. I am at about 22 years old, as I said before. I currently work for County Commissioner Kelly Martinez Semrad, and I, as one of her policy research aides, and I am actually in my last semester for my master's in public administration. If all goes well, I will be graduating with it in May.
Cool. Awesome. Well, my name is Matthew Grocholske. I use they, he pronouns. I'm pretty often on this podcast, I feel at this point.
Special segment.
Yeah. But I am the president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida, which is an organization that works within the Democratic Party to uplift progressives, progressive organizers, and progressive elected officials. But I'm also the secretary of the Florida Young Democrats. I'm an organizer within Orlando 5051. I help run alongside another friend who I think has been on the podcast, Lindsay. I help run the Advocacy Hub and the Democracy Guild as well within 5051, giving legislative updates all the time. Wear a lot more hats, so I'm more than happy also to share those eventually down the line.
That episode with Lindsay hasn't dropped yet.
Oh,
Go ahead, Xiani.
My name is Xiani. I'm originally from Miami, but I moved down here for college, and I got involved in 22, realizing that I could vote at the age of 18, getting involved with candidates. And now I bounce around, but I've been trying to just help elect more local progressive candidates and anti-corruption candidates in Miami.
And unlike those two, the first time, I'm always trying to peer pressure people into running for office. And unlike those two, as soon as I asked Xiani, hey, do you want to run for office? Xiani was like, yes. And I already have a plan. And I'm like, oh, okay. Not even beating around the bush. You already know what you want to do. So let's start off with legislative session. Every year, our Republican-controlled legislative session seems to pass more and more egregious bills that are taking away local control and taking away our right to free speech. In this year in particular, it feels like a hailstorm and a hurricane happening at the same time because it's a supermajority. And now they have unchecked accountability, lack of accountability at the federal level. It just feels like anything goes right now, to the point where even Republican lobbyists that have gone up to Tallahassee for 20 years said that they don't even want to go anymore because when they try to sit down and have common sense conversations about land use or whatever, they're just filing whatever the paid industry lobbyists are handing them and just basically checking out when it comes to constituents trying to get, insight.
It is a midterm year after all, so they want to get as many bills out as possible to show their donors and their more emphatic constituents that they are trying to do things per their ideology.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that, are impacting us this year. One of which you would think would be like a death sentence to anybody politically in their campaigns on an election year. But I think all three of you have brought up to me at some point about your experience with gun violence or how your schools have had to change different policies from gun violence. And here we are where Republican-controlled legislature is actively pulling back and saying, we want to go back on some of our reforms that they did after the Parkland shooting and lower the gun age to 18. Let's talk a little bit about that, Matt.
Yeah, so there is a bill named HB 133, which actually passed already the State House floor, which would roll back some key Parkland protections, lowering the minimum age of purchase a firearm in the state of Florida from 21 to 18. And lots of the public commentary that we saw about this bill were actually from Parkland survivors, from FSU students who were just impacted by a mass shooting that just happened on their campus, just a few blocks from the Florida Capitol. And this has been a bill that the Florida State House supermajority has been trying to pass the past few legislative sessions, but the state Senate has kind of blocked it. It's prevented the bill from being passed. And that's something I'm personally very fortunate of. I mentioned to Lee, I think on the first time I was on this podcast.
First episode ever.
Yeah, the first episode, that one of my first actions was to organize a middle school walkout in response to Parkland. And that's a very unfortunate Floridian tragedy that does pop up so often, is the fact that students unfortunately find their way into purchasing firearms over and over again, or getting a hold of them in some way. And it's a public safety issue for our colleges. That's something that definitely also got brought up, is the fact that sometimes students, especially in college, have mental health crises, and it's not okay or for their benefit to be able to so easily purchase a firearm in the state of Florida, where then they could potentially kill themselves. Yeah. And that's a very tragic thing to see, and to read that, the Florida State House supermajority is going to roll back a bipartisan solution to ending gun violence. I will say something that actually flew under the radar is that last week, I believe, there was actually a bill hearing in its first committee that would have allowed open carry on college campuses. That bill very fortunately got amended to actually make it a pretty decent enough omnibus bill about protecting students, actually putting more guardianship programs, putting more therapy resources, that type of thing for college students. But again, these types of rollbacks on basic protections and gun violence measures is really sad to see.
It seems to be something of a pattern with these particular crop of Republican legislators in particular, because every time there is some step in the right direction towards these safety nets, towards these legal protections, they always want to push them back and actually regress further. And that's always a pattern with anything, including and especially reproductive rights and abortion, which I know is a bill that we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also flag, it's not just Republicans actually voting for these rollbacks of protections. It's also some Democrats as well that are voting to lower the minimum age of purchase a firearm. There's lots of other bills that I know that we'll be discussing later, but bills about, for example, mandating small businesses to utilize E-Verify, which jeopardizes our immigrant communities, actually our small businesses, because it's not realistic for most small businesses of about 5 employees, for example, to have E-Verify. That just doesn't make sense. Sometimes after I get hired, for example, at a job, sometimes it takes a week or 2 weeks for them to process all my documentation. So imagine that for a way smaller business. And also in 2 weeks, which is what the bill mandates, is the whole process is just 2 weeks from activation of employment. And, this is a very unfortunate question that I think we do have to ask is, what is the point of flipping the supermajority when we have Democrats that are voting for some of the least democratic things possible?
And I want to add in on that as well, because that just adds, like, everybody keeps complaining about how, we had to deal with so much bureaucracy and red tape in government. That is a key example of that, because that is actually hurting our small businesses by adding additional costs and taking much longer for them to get up and running. It could actually hurt their bottom line in the long run. So it is very two-faced for Republicans and Democrats alike to vote for these and actively harm not only immigrant workers who come here to work and to live and to become Americans, but also to hurt those established or wanting to be established businesses in our community. It makes no sense.
Well, it sounds very much like there's some campaign contributions that probably have fed into why anybody would want to even consider this.
It may also be just like outsized fear or hysteria, so to speak, from certain elements of society.
Xiani looks like he has gossip.
I mean, Tallahassee, follow the money in Tallahassee. A lot of the politicians are bought and paid. I hate to say it. Even Democrats, it's all public record. I've looked through it. It's crazy how many of these politicians that we've elected just take the corporate money and vote their way. Very few representatives in Tallahassee I've noticed don't take corporate money, and it's really sad. Like FPL and those big corporations just buy out our politicians, and that's really sad to see.
And sometimes it leads to, corporate entities handwriting bills that these legislators just file and don't even amend or even fight for on the floor.
I have a very funny story, actually. I was at a local event, not going to say which representative, but I came up to this representative and I said, hey, like, how's the floor? Crazy that some of your Democrat colleagues are voting for some crazy bills. That's nuts. And I think he thinks I'm a lobbyist because I'm always up in Tallahassee testifying against these really bad bills, not because I'm paid, but out of hoping that there's a better Florida and that in these halls of power, there's someone that can fight for the people who can't be in those halls. And he's like, yeah, I mean, that happens a lot. I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately been a problem in the House Democratic Caucus that there's a lot of defectors. And he goes, I'm not actually going to push for my bills to be passed. It's the lobbyists like you. That is who actually pushes the bills. And I was like, okay. Well,
I don't think you understand what your role is, sir.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to sit pretty. And
what is going on?
Well, I think, I find it, first of all, interesting that legislator's on guard for seeing you so much that they automatically assume that you're paid when they completely disregard the fact that you all being young people having to take time, money, and, emotional capacity out of your life to go up and fight for your future as often as you do. They don't even consider that. Right. And right now, there's a lot of bills that I feel if young people only knew, they would be mobilizing and organizing right now because, after President Biden completely ignored and actually ended up attacking young people who were organizing against the genocide in Gaza on college campuses, it was the Democrats that were mobilizing the police and starting to come down on certain organizations, suggesting that they were, inhibiting the free speech of other college students when there was proof that they were perfectly safe. Moral of the story is that now it's basically open to interpretation what domestic terrorism is. Mm-hmm. And for that, the bills that we're seeing coming out of Tallahassee to restrict young people of their, amendment rights to organize and to protest on campus are under attack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there is a bill, as Lee alluded to, that basically makes it easier to designate certain organizations, especially student organizations, as terrorist organizations. And this bill became a thing because late last year, I think it was November or December, the governor declared CAIR, the Council of, American Islamic Relations, a terrorist organization. And that came with a bunch of lawsuits and that type of thing. So then a lawmaker from South Florida that actually was a Democrat when she was elected last flipped to the Republican Party because she thinks that the Florida Democrat Party isn't pro-Israel enough, which is
crazy.
A lot to me. Yeah.
Because every time I see Nikki Fried, she's wearing an Israeli pin.
Right.
Also has a great opponent, by the way, running against him.
So she introduced a bill that attacked Sharia law in state government. And we all said, well, we don't agree with Sharia law, but how many government employees in Florida actually believe in Sharia law?
Yeah.
You can't name any. And then, there was another conversation going on because actually, and I'll give them a lot of amazing credit for this, a lot of Jewish organizations really opposed the bill vocally. The Democratic Party's Jewish caucus opposed it. Our state Senate minority leader, Lori Berman, who is Jewish, wrote an op-ed in opposition to the bill. But it then unfortunately came into a conversation where the bill sponsor, Hillary Cassell, claimed that immigrants have not assimilated so far into America, including our Muslim community. And it became even clearer that the bill was built off of Islamophobia. And now they're introducing this bill after actually withdrawing the anti-Sharia law bill to now introduce a bill that's more of an omnibus that could jeopardize organizations like the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It could jeopardize 5051, could jeopardize Students Demand Action.
It could jeopardize any student group that speaks out or organizes that they don't feel, aligns with the governor at the time.
Even a college Democrat club, which is crazy.
Yeah. Even League of Women Voters.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, they can
even like groups like yours, like any number of your allies or your organizations could also be caught under this as well.
I already knew they were coming for me. I knew I'm on some kind of list.
But it just really speaks to the priorities that certain elected officials and certainly our governor has, rather than addressing the affordability crisis that Floridians at large are subjected to on a day-to-day basis. Rather than uniting people around that, the governor and his Republican allies, and even some Democrats, as we've been alluding to time and again, have sought to try and divide communities, even though it is very clear that everybody, whether from members of the Muslim population, the Jewish population, or anybody not in either of those communities, see that this is an effort just to keep us divided. For whatever reason, you can probably put a couple $1 million on that for yourselves. But the fact remains is that our government system is fundamentally broken, and it is all running on fear at this point.
And culture wars too.
Culture wars, fear, and hate.
Yeah. And I don't know if you actually knew this, but I know that you mentioned and Democrats. Mind you, actually, it passed its first state house committee hearing just last week, and there's 5 Democrats on the committee. Guess how many voted against it?
How many?
3. Only 3. We had 2 Democrats, including, this is the craziest part, the Florida Democratic side's whip, which is supposed to make members vote against bills, vote for it. And then there's another bill that most organizations haven't paid too much attention to, but starts a state's counterintelligence and counterterrorism unit, basically. The bill actually has a sponsor who is also a Democrat.
Oh my God.
So it's very unfortunate that, once again, it seems like, we're talking a lot at length in other episodes, and I think that's a very important thing to still have a discussion about flipping the supermajority in Tallahassee. But also, we have about 10 members of the Florida State House Democrat Caucus that vote consistently with Republicans over and over,
which is crazy,
and over.
I didn't know that a state was able to even have a counterintelligence agency. Since when are we in the business of foreign affairs? Isn't that what Washington's supposed to do? Genuinely.
You would think.
Why are we wasting money and time and staff capacity for all of this?
Well, does APAC money even flow into Florida?
Well, through our congressional delegation for sure, but
is it enough? Where is this push? Because I don't see the Jewish counter resources that are trying to combat anti-Semitism, as they say, but it's really organizations that just want no accountability whatsoever. It's not like the Jewish Voice for Peace or some of the other real grassroots organizations that represent their base. It's typically like the well-funded PACs that are honestly just trying to continue to get free American money for bombs and resources.
For every year now, there is Israel Day at the Capitol. And mind you, and I know we're about to probably discuss this bill, but the second and last State House committee hearing for Judea and Samaria walked into this room expecting not too many people, because unfortunately, the first time the bill actually received a State House hearing, there's not too many people in the room. It was packed, because it was Israel Day at the Capitol, and they purposefully picked and selected the second committee stop to be the exact day that there was Israel Day at the Capitol.
So they can garner as much support for it as they thought they would.
Right. And so there is organizations adjacent to APAC. I mean, there's a version of APAC at the University of Central Florida that does have a state policy focus. So there are tons of organizations that work a little bit outside the traditional structures that we do see in other states that still do the same exact lobbying and advocacy effort.
They may not give directly, but to the candidate. I don't know, but
yeah. So there's still some ways.
Well, let's talk about that bill.
So,
because I have no idea what it is. It sounds so out of the scope of literally Floridians are losing their homes. We have the highest foreclosure rate in the United States right now. Our water quality is the worst in the country. Our pedestrian fatality rate is the highest in the country. Our property insurance is skyrocketing beyond what we can afford. And yet we're passing bills like this.
So, as Lee was mentioning, there is a bill to rename in Florida government documents. And also, actually, this was added in its first State House committee hearing, also textbooks and educational materials, to rename the region known as the West Bank to Judea and Samaria. And when it first passed, that textbook provision was not in the bill. So they put it through any fiscal committees because there was no fiscal cost to the bill. And now there is a fiscal cost because you have to think about how many textbooks need to be updated. The bill sponsor actually, funnily enough, claims that, we renew textbooks every single year anyway, so there's actually not going to be a cost with it.
I don't.
And it's like
textbooks every year.
Yeah, have you been to a Florida classroom in the past decade?
My books are from the 80s.
Right.
Mine are from the early 2000s.
Yeah. So now the bill analysis claims that there is actually a negative fiscal impact, but they can't figure out what that fiscal impact would be because similarly to the Gulf of America bill that they passed last legislative session, which again, some Democrats voted for, they have to change the textbooks again to reflect a Florida policy. And there's been a lot of issues about this bill specifically because when Gulf of America became a thing, it's stupid, obviously.
Yeah.
It sounds like a joke. I mean, people here laughed about it. I mean, it is pretty laughable. But the federal government, at the very least, did recognize that region as the Gulf of America. However, the federal government still recognizes the West Bank as the West Bank. So we would actually go against what the federal government is calling an international region, which doesn't make any sense at all. The Gulf of America was stupid, but this one's actually, to me, incredibly hurtful because we've had a series of young Floridians get kidnapped or murdered in the West Bank by Israeli settlers. And even some people who are more Zionist, including some Zionist organizations like J Street, for example, will call settlers what they are, radical terrorists, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're trying to colonize a region, take away land, murder, and kidnap people in the West Bank. And this bill actually aligns us exactly with those terrorist organizations that are murdering people, like Mo's cousin, for example, Mo Abraham. So it's a really disgusting bill that will hurt our Palestinian community. I think there's about 11,000 Palestinians that live in Florida and call Florida home. Some of those families have been facing some of the largest brutalization that I can even imagine, just for being born in Palestine in the West Bank. And this bill is so hurtful. I mean, I remember in the second committee hearing the policy director for an organization called Florida for All, which is an amazing organization. She spoke and she mentioned that she is a survivor of another genocide, the Bosnian genocide, and how if randomly the Florida state legislature, after moving to Florida, renamed a part of Bosnia, how disrespectful that would be to imagine that your own state government would vilify you, even though your people have gone through probably the worst few years imaginable.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, it's just, again, I have to go back to just how screwed our state's priorities are, because I want people at home to really imagine the true extent to which our state is trying to stick its finger into this pie, so to speak, because it makes no sense whatsoever. At the very minimum, they're wasting your taxpayer dollars to change textbooks to replace one word with 3 and completely paper over a more accurate history, which robs you of an accurate education, which is what the state's been doing for years now. But now, though, they are trying to sow this sort of chaos and this sort of division within communities that, again, it just hurts people. Now, I know there could be many people who are asking, well, this doesn't affect me. I don't know where the West Bank is. I don't care about the West Bank. So why is this something that we're taking up? Because it's a matter of dignity and human respect, frankly.
And it's also, I mean, those are the same people that are usually like, I don't want a single undocumented immigrant to get a penny for healthcare if I don't have access to healthcare.
Which beyond the fact that undocumented immigrants don't get federal healthcare because they are legally not allowed to under federal statute.
But they have this idea in their head that they're being robbed a penny from someone that is undeserving. Meanwhile, they're going to just allow us to allocate resources to do these culture war things without expecting any relief on any of the other affordability crises that we have.
And I really wanted to talk about that sort of social dynamic because the entire history of the United States and its relationship to government has been built on that sort of distrust. Yeah. All the way back to when we were like claiming that we were being taxed more on tea than the Brits were. Mm-hmm. History aside, that sort of trust issue has been embedded in our culture and in our historical documents and is still present to this very day. And yet when these sorts of things happen, when more money is wasted on holding our elected officials accountable or over accountable, I should say, and trying to rein in bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats and their reckless spending, all it is more reckless spending, preventing people from doing their jobs. Imagine if at a private business, at a corporation, you have software developers who have to use this particular sort of software or have to follow these particular rules or have to wear this particular uniform. Not only is that dehumanizing, it also wastes money and it deprives people of their creativity and it deprives people of their innovation. Mm-hmm. So and yet still people continually say, oh, it's the immigrants' fault. Oh, no, it's trans people's fault. No. It is much more than just a marginalized community. Mm-hmm. But I need to get off my soapbox because I know we have a long thing going.
I feel it. And one thing that you mentioned that made me think about another point about the bill is the fact that we're talking about marginalized communities that are deeply impacted. I mean, the Jewish community has faced a wave of anti-Semitism, and it's been really saddening to see. But the bill sponsor has mentioned that it's an interfaith bill. He's called it an interfaith bill because he's a Christian pastor, and the other co-sponsor of the bill, co-introducer of the bill, is a Democrat Jewish state representative. Mm-hmm. So that makes it an interfaith bill, but there is no Muslim member of the Florida State House. Mm-hmm. There is no Muslim member of the Florida State Senate.
And that just really, I have to ask again, it's like, what is the purpose of this bill if not to combat anti-Semitism or to do whatever they claim this bill wants to do? Because what I'm seeing, it's just an erasure of history and culture.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's really fundamentally depressing because I'll always remember on my first year of attending Florida state legislative session, there was this state representative who's now a judge, actually in South Florida, named Chris Benjamin. And Chris Benjamin was the only practicing Muslim member of the Florida State House. And he spoke so eloquently on this bill that would have expanded anti-Semitism into, I believe, the IHRA definition, which does potentially harm pro-Palestinian organizers by saying that going against the state of Israel is anti-Semitic. And he spoke on his concerns about the bill on the state house floor. And after that, I just was walking around the offices. I saw him. I thanked him for his comments. And I've never seen a state representative feel so appreciated in that moment because I knew that the amount of stuff that was being said about him probably in the caucus and all the terrible stuff that our own state lawmakers on the Democratic side fling to people that speak out in instances like these, it's a lot. It's a lot to carry on your shoulders. I mean, during the second committee hearing for this very bill, State Representative Nixon almost broke down crying because she had so much trauma from when she introduced her ceasefire resolution and how much hate she got, not just from the Republican side, but also the Democratic side.
Yeah.
And how that ruined her almost as a state representative, because it just made her so depressed almost to be the only person on the floor talking about how terrible it is that she's seeing videos and images of children being slaughtered overseas and crying while preaching about it, and state lawmakers literally saying, oh, not her, in response to her asking how many dead Palestinians is enough for you to take action, other state representatives saying, well, it's not enough right now.
I mean, we have
Crazy.
elected officials in Florida that were saying they want to see an atomic bomb go off in Gaza.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, we have some really disgusting legislators on both sides that are well funded by interests. It doesn't even have to be corporate interests. That I think sometimes have a louder voice in the room than the people. And so you have to be brave, and I'm proud of the representatives that were brave and were able to speak out for the right things. But in this moment, you know, I just wish more people were vocal on every level, because right now we're seeing an unprecedented amount of preemption bills that are moving through the state legislature right now. They're taking away home rule, but I'm not seeing this mass resurgence of like local elected officials that are going up to defend their local control. And even with the property tax fight that's coming, it makes me a little embarrassed, because that is the state wanting to have control over every penny and wanting local governments, AKA Orange County, to beg for every penny that they want in order to just pay our people. If we lose property taxes, we're not going to be able to do any of the ambitious housing, homeless solutions, even paying our staff a fair enough wage so we don't have a 20% deficit in our own team.
You won't even be able to just do the basic services that you can do right now, because anywhere between a significant limitation on property assessments to the outright elimination or phasing out of property taxes would mean for households up and down the state, no matter if you're living in Orange County, in Sarasota County, in Alachua County, Miami-Dade County, wherever you are, you'd probably be paying a far higher sales tax rate because of at least 12 to 14% higher than you are right now. And that's from one of these bills. One of the fiscal analyses said that would increase it by that much. So I understand, believe me, it's very difficult to afford living in this state nowadays. Make no mistake, we are not saying that, we need to keep property taxes, but without any other regard. No, and we're saying that the elimination of property taxes is actually going to make things harder for everybody, because your basic services, from your roads to your police to your emergency services to your garbage collection to your schools, will just not receive the same amount of funding, nor the same stable amount of funding.
Right.
So, and sales taxes, I want to talk to the audience as well about what Lee meant by the state controlling every penny. So the state has a specific reserve or fund for sales tax revenue that is generated in each county in the state. So every year or so, I believe, each county has to send that amount of money up to the state, and they basically get some percentage back from the state. Usually it's less than what's collected, because the state has their own funds to cover. If property taxes, which are collected and directly by counties and local jurisdictions, if those go away, counties will be subject to the politicized collection of sales taxes, which then means the state will decide for counties what they can and cannot spend their money on. And that is a devastating feature that I don't hear many people talking about, because that will be such a wreck for families up and down the income chain, unless you're, of course, stupidly wealthy.
Where they're already showing us with the FAFO audit, they're already showing that they're sending subpoenas to our local government staff.
And how much money are they wasting on those? Genuinely
That's
speaking,
a great question.
Because,
they're
like,
wasting money doing these subpoenas and doing these
And the whole
audits.
Doge
and they
stuff.
want to codify that state agency into federal law. Think about that. If they want to make government more efficient, they're adding a new agency to an already bloated bureaucracy in the state. Are you kidding me?
And what they're outlining in their assessment are things like routers for kids that during COVID had to work outside of a Taco Bell because they didn't have access to internet, or homeless solutions, or pedestrian safety infrastructure. Like, these are things that they're trying to claim are fraud, but they're real world funding line items that are improving our quality of life.
Meantime, the state spent $8 million buying 4 parcels of sand in Destin, Florida. I hope you guys didn't know that sooner, because now you know. And that was sanctioned by the governor. And the land that they own, that the person who owned those parcels of land was a GOP mega donor.
Right.
Look it up.
And what I'm afraid of is next time, if it succeeds, if they gut property taxes, next time we want to, I don't know, give our sheriff or our fire officers a little bit of a bump, or even just pay them basic wages, we're going to have to go up to the state, and the state can say, well, I don't like that you tried to pass a, green infrastructure charter amendment, or I don't like that you, have these LGBTQ grants for the arts, or I don't like, and they can withhold funding until you change whatever policy that they don't like.
Which more often than not leads to less efficient government, which is the whole point.
I mean, look at our 8 years of spending millions of dollars to create Vision 2050, our comprehensive plan, for the state legislature to basically block our comprehensive plan, millions of our dollars, using millions more to now do a legal battle in the courts because they want developers to have a free-for-all here in the state of Florida.
And that is, again, very indicative of just general governance, not only in the state, but in the country as a whole. Because our civil servants, those people who spend hours of their years of their lives and so much experience and so much taxpayer dollars creating something that would improve the quality of life for Orange County residents, that goes up in flames because of fundamentally contradicting mandates. They were mandated to develop smart growth plans in the 2011, can't remember the specific bill, but now they have this SB 180 bill that has come through and said, nope, you can't do that. It's too restrictive and burdensome. What the hell does that mean?
Right.
What the hell does restrictive and burdensome mean? We don't know. We're just going to wait for the agency to give us a definition. Oh, never mind. We took that out of the bill that's going to fix this bill. Sorry, folks. You just got to wait till you go through the courts. That's the dynamic.
And property tax amendments that they are proposing, because it's not just bills, they're constitutional amendments. So they would deeply impact us, not just for next year or until, the Democratic Party takes power. I mean, it's going to impact us for decades potentially, because it's so difficult to remove a Florida constitutional amendment when it became law. I mean, they've tried to crack down, obviously, on medical marijuana after that became a thing. They're actually this legislative session trying to circumnavigate the $15 minimum wage for internships. That's another bill that's receiving some hearings. So, I mean, this is going to be something that deeply impacts us for decades. And every time I'm in Tallahassee, I mean, one of them is receiving a new hearing. And every single time I'm in the room for these property tax amendments, it's people from labor unions. It's people who are firefighters begging them to not pass these amendments because they've decided, oh, wait, the police could get defunded. So let's sneak a provision into some of these amendments texts saying that you cannot defund the police, but leave out the firefighters, which is crazy.
They did go back and change. They did go back and fix that up, but even still, it's like the fact that they overlooked the firefighters, of all people, is insanity.
Yeah.
Well, we have more bills that we want to talk through, but I actually just want to get into, because everything I'm hearing comes down to we have to vote these people out. Democrat, Republican, if you're voting terribly, we have to transition we have to primary these people to make them feel the heat. And we have to vote for better candidates and get better people elected. So I want to run through, and this is where Xiani shines the most, because you're from Miami, which used to be a Democrat threshold.
It was.
And there's so much corruption and so much money that goes in. I'm curious, like, what are some races in Miami, for example, that you think we should be paying attention to in 2026?
I'm trying to think. So we do have a congressional seat. My representative, Maria Salazar, is up for re-election. There are 2 Democrats running there, Richard Lamondon and Robin Peguero. We'll see. It's going to be a competitive primary. I have an open state house race right there where 2 Democrats are running, Gloria Romero and Justin Mendoza Rout. And it's an open seat, by the way. The commissioner, the state rep there got appointed to be the next county commissioner. So there could be some competitive races, but it's all about who we nominate as the candidate, because that's what I'm worried about, is how much power one person has in the Democratic Party in Miami-Dade, where they can essentially just pick and choose who the nominees are. And if you're not with this consultant, then, hey, you can't win the primary.
And I think this is a problem, because when we talk about Democrats voting against the Democratic caucus at the state legislature, it's very much because there's this elite group of consultants that kind of have their hands in managing the atmosphere in a campaign. And what ends up happening is, if you're against them, you're basically like set up to fail and you're considered not viable.
I 100% agree. It's basically a gate in Miami. If you don't, and I would say it's one person. It's one singular person. There's not multiple people in Miami-Dade. In the Democratic Party, I'd say there's one person who runs this firm. And yeah, if you don't use him for your campaign, or if you're not, I guess, blessed to run for that seat, it makes it really difficult. And we've seen that in a lot of races. For example, there's a state house race in Miami Beach. Fabian Basabe, the incumbent. There's a candidate running there named Lucia Geller, who's amazing. She's a former school board member, great candidate. And then finally, somebody else is running. Her name is Ashley Litwin Diego, who is some attorney, but guess who she's using to run her campaign? That same firm. So they are running candidates against Democrats. And by the way, apparently I was told this person has a lot of money. So now we're just running these candidates against other Democrats. That's not what we should be doing. So this firm they have a lot of power and influence in the Democratic Party. The mayor of Miami-Dade County, Daniel Levin Cava, that's one of his big candidates. Eileen Higgins, the mayor of Miami, that's one of his big candidates. So this guy has a lot of control in the Democratic Party and makes a lot of moves. And I think it's really concerning. And fun fact, in my state house district, there was a woman that was going to run there who was amazing. And behind the scenes, him and some other people behind the scenes basically dissuaded her from running. And I think that's really sad that we have somebody that can just control this party. And we really need to get the Miami-Dade Democratic Party back to a path where it's not run by a consultant, basically.
Progressive caucus.
Yeah,
I think we need our own wing. I mean, we have that here in Orange County, like Buddy Dyer is at the helm of multiple consultants that he hand selects what candidates they're going to run and endorse, and ran Steve Leary against, Commissioner Kelly Martinez
and Roger Chapin just recently.
And just ran Roger Chapin, who, by the way, was a part of OUC during the time when they did historic rate increases and basically really hurt our local ability to have full net metering for solar. So it's people like that who, just because they're Democrats doesn't necessarily mean that they're really looking at a Democratic agenda, because we don't really have an agenda that is, something that we should expect candidates to wholeheartedly speak to. So because we don't have that, we just have Democrats that just run and say, hey, we're better than Trump, and so just vote for us blindly. But behind the scenes, that means consultants and industry can fund and manipulate these candidates to be whoever they want them to be. And that's how we get terrible votes.
Yep. There is no shared value set within the Democratic Party that is fundamentally aligned with the average working American. I don't know if that's a controversial statement. I may get a lot of flack for that. I don't care. Somebody needs to say it. The Democratic Party has no shared value system, no shared policy vision in this country, let alone in the state of Florida. No offense, Nikki. actually all the offense, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, oh, let's talk about affordability. And then they don't really have an actual plan.
Right. Yeah. There's no, and what really kills me is that even when they do have policies, there's no plan for implementation. Like, I would love to hear the plans like elected officials have when it comes to implementing some of their ideas. Because at face value, sure, these policies may sound good, but when you really dig underneath, just even 2 inches underneath, it's tin pot, because it's just meant to really get votes out. That's what our political machines on both sides of the party both sides of the political spectrum have become, is that we just say things for vibes and inshallah. There's literally nothing more concrete behind it all. And it's really, really pissing me off, if you couldn't tell.
Well, what races should we be paying attention to?
Oh, I'll go. So I'm going to steal some from you, Ethan, that I think you might mention. Well, first, there's actually potentially going to be another ballot initiative to the ballot that is not being talked about, actually. So once again, the Florida state legislature last legislative session enacted a bunch of initiatives to basically restrict our citizen-led ballot initiative process. And this year, of course, they're deciding to instead put on the ballot about probably 10 at this point state legislative constitutional amendments, because the state legislature can propose their own. And of course, there's the property tax ones that I know you have a lot of takes about. But there's actually one that I don't think people have talked about. And it's this constitutional amendment to protect religion in classrooms. So the constitutional amendment basically reads that it's going to codify the moment of silence that the state legislature passed a few years ago into our state constitution. It's going to allow for moments of prayer at school athletic events, that type of thing. So it's a constitutional amendment to basically allow for religion to be more, accepted during, moments of educational instruction. And that's something that just has not received too many eyes, because I think people have
religion
kind of gone to the point of like forgetting that in America, school prayer is still a fight that unfortunately has to be fought for some odd reason of the separation of church and state. I think, unfortunately, we've kind of forgotten that is unfortunately a fight that is still needing to be had. And the constitutional amendment does not specifically say that, classroom prayer is going to be encouraged. But definitely sets up a lot of opportunities for school prayer to happen.
How is this the same party that says, I want parental choice, I want a teacher fired if they use the wrong pronouns or the wrong name for my child, and I want every single nickname to be run by me and approved, but not the party that says, well, if you send your kid to school and they do a prayer that's outside of your religion, that you need to just be okay with that, because your child now needs to be susceptible to any type of religion being practiced in school.
Right. So that's one I'm actually watching. I mean, it definitely needs to first pass the state legislature, but every single vote it's received in committees thus far has been completely unanimous. So it's been widely accepted by both Democrats and Republicans. I'm obviously watching the U.S. Senate election in Florida, where my friend, State Representative Angie Nixon and veteran Tamika Lyles are both running. Jennifer Jenkins, a Brevard County school board member, just withdrew from the election. There was more of a D.C. pick in Alex Vidman, who just announced, who was, to his credit, the whistleblower that did help the first Trump impeachment to happen. But, he is a DC, insider. His wife is on the DNC in the Veterans Council. And of course, he's built up a lot of respect and definitely, understand his military service. But Angie has been fighting for decades for Floridian labor rights. She introduced resolutions to call for, a humanitarian foreign policy perspective when it comes to Palestine. She has been the fighter that I think we need. And Tamika as well, she's a veteran. She brings a very unique perspective on foreign policy.
I agree.
And Xiani has no fear.
Oh, yeah.
Xiani went straight up to the meeting where they both spoke and asked them the same question.
I asked both Jennifer Jenkins and Tamika Lyles. Jennifer Jenkins couldn't even answer my question. She said she didn't know, and then she hasn't read it, and then she turned her answer into a sympathy answer.
We'll talk about the question.
Shied away. So I want to ask the Senate candidates, hey, do you support the Bernie Sanders arms resolution? Should we be sending more weapons to Israel? So at one of the meetings, I asked Tamika Lyles that question. First off, I had no idea who she was. I came in completely blind. But then I asked her the question, and she literally said, yes, she supports it and free Palestine. And I was like, that is incredible. We need more politicians with that bravery, I think. But Jennifer Jenkins just turned.
We know Angie as well.
Yeah, Angie's definitely good. Of course.
But this new Senate candidate basically has openly said that it's not a genocide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, his comms, for example, have been very reminiscent of the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, which has backed candidates like Janet Mills over Graham Plattner, backed candidates against Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, these really great progressives that are meeting the moment and really redefining what campaigns can be. Mm-hmm. It's really upsetting to see that type of DC influence spread to the state of Florida. And, I've always said this since day one of this midterm election happening. If we do not nominate a Black person on the statewide ballot as the Florida Democratic Party, when Byron Donalds might become the first Black governor of the state of Florida, that's going to be a slap in the face of so many Black ordinances.
And run a racist agenda.
Yeah. And it's like
continuously locking people up and sending them to detention centers as a Black governor. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
But it's a perspective I've heard from a lot of our Black leaders in the state, is that they feel like the Florida Democratic Party and the Democratic Party at large has been very disrespectful to Black leaders, especially Black women. Mm-hmm. So to deny a very qualified lawmaker or a very qualified veteran the opportunity to run for U.S. Senate, to build a movement, because I do seriously think both of them have the opportunity to run a people-powered campaign where it is grassroots, where there is real field infrastructure happening, is abysmal to me. But I also struggle because so many people say, well, Angie's too progressive, so she won't win. So how do we fundamentally shift the, let's say, 57% of the electorate who voted for Donald Trump in a high turnout election year to a Democratic victory? We're not going to do that in one cycle.
Ethan has all the answers.
Well, I don't, but
not with the DC candidate.
I don't have all the answers, just to set expectations for everybody. But I do want to point to Texas, because I know that that's where this thing was going, and I cannot help but talk about that. So last night there was a special election to replace a resigning state senator in Texas, of all places. This is State Senate District 9. I cannot remember the names for the life of me. I do apologize to the audience at home. But thank you, Lee, for getting on that. But the long short of it is that the Democrats in this race was a union organizer, not just an organizer, but a leader going up against an executive director and quote unquote GOP activist. Make of that what you will. Mm-hmm. The Republican candidate had raised $2 million to advertise against the Democrat, who raised only $200,000.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But by this morning, the Democrat in Texas, in a district that went for Donald Trump in 2024 by plus 17 points, beat the GOP candidate by 14 to 15 points.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's Taylor Raymett versus Leah Wamsbuggins.
It's a really weird name.
Yeah.
Well, nobody cares.
S's at the
Well, nobody cares about the GOP candidate anymore. She lost.
I mean, she's hot and blonde, and usually hot blondes that are Republican activists usually are a shoo-in a Trump plus district.
Look at the Democrats, like his platform.
Well, he's a union organizer.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like that in and of itself, because, Texas is the place where when Elon Musk wasn't getting his way in California, was like, I'm bringing all of my operations to Texas to circumvent workers' rights. So the fact that a union organizer was able to make that gain is really symbolic in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Angie is also a union organizer.
Yeah.
That's where she came from. I guess I mentioned that more so of the people that are worried that Angie Nixon can't win the U.S. Senate election. To be honest, it doesn't look like a great opportunity already. So why not invest in the candidate that is an organizer, that knows that a real field campaign is how we'll eventually win the state of Florida, where she knows that there's good investments in voter registration. Yeah. So I'll take the perspective outside that, I do actually think Angie could probably win a U.S. Senate election. I do, especially against Ashley Moody. But even taking that perspective out, why not invest in the candidate that I know for a fact would actually invest in long-term strategy to win over the state against this DC insider that, to me, he's never articulated his real investment to want to win the state. The only time I think that Florida Democratic Party members have really heard about Alex Vidman is when he started running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah,
and when
that's the
he
first
was
time I heard about
pseudo campaigning for this office in the first place, speaking at galas, speaking at all these things. I've never seen him at headline before this whole U.S. Senate election, a gala to fundraise for the party. I've never seen that happen. So the fact that we're actually going towards maybe a short term, maybe he'll lose by like 3% versus an actual long-term investment just does not make any sense to me.
I mean, meantime as well, you have folks like Zohran Mamdani in New York City who had a 1% chance of winning the New York City mayoral primaries and back in 2025. He now leads the financial capital of the world. Say what you will about New York City being this progressive hub. It is also the home of Wall Street, home of big businesses, home of so many lobbying and big financial firms. He had to win them over with his policies, and he did.
I'm so excited to see what he and Lena Khan put together. But
trust me, he's gonna cook.
Another race in Texas that happened last night was the U.S. House District 18, where it wasn't a gain. It was like just a Democrat that won a Democratic seat. But I find this particularly interesting because he was outspent by 10 times, Christian Menifee. And he's the type of candidate that pledged, mostly grassroots, pledged not to trade any stocks, and is really open to holding ICE really accountable by defunding ICE.
And abolishing it too.
And not just, don't wear masks anymore, let's do reform. It's like, no, actually, let's get ICE off of our streets. And now that's narrowed the Republican-controlled House down to one vote.
Yep. So, and this is coming up too. This is important too, because the DHS funding bill, the minibus, is actually going to come to the floor tomorrow for a vote. If Johnson decides to go to the Paris Stones, he needs to actually put the bill on the floor.
Well, if Johnson even swears him in a timely enough manner.
Like the Gravala incident. Yeah.
So, I mean, these are races that I think Florida is compared to Texas the most, because right around the time that Governor DeSantis won again in 2022, I'm pretty sure that's when Beto lost again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there was like this reflective, okay, they both are like purging voters. They both were human trafficking migrants to big cities. Mm-hmm. They were both like Republican controlled and just corrupt. And to see Texas starting these momentous flips and gains, I feel like we have a huge opportunity to make those same statewide gains. It's just that we can't shoot ourselves in the foot as Democrats because just because we get a Democrat in doesn't mean it's a win if they're not actually willing to vote on our policies and have a true agenda.
It's a matter of Democrats trying not to capitulate to individuals and voices that honestly don't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Not to say that there's no voters out there that don't mean. Of course, there's going to be. Of course, everybody. This is a democracy, But the Democrats are trying to play this game where they try to appeal to everybody. And they try to do so by pandering to individual cohorts and individual groups without having a real long-term agenda for how to actually address the concerns that continually get raised by them. And as we've said up top earlier, that the Democrats back in 2018, back in 2020, again in 2022, and now again in 2024, and today, the Democrats have consistently run on, we're not Donald Trump. You see how bad he is. We are not him. Vote us in and we'll do something. But there's nothing, like if you were to ask your candidate, whether you are in your city commission or you're asking a senatorial candidate what you plan to do and how you plan to do it, they won't give you an answer.
Well, what are some races we should be paying attention to in the state right now?
I feel like we've asked that.
Well, I'll
already.
move. I'll continue on my list.
Not just Senate, but I mean
Right.
like House district races.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's of course my friend Jane Amen, who's running for state house against Susan Placencia. Susan Placencia is the state representative for the University of Central Florida area, and she's honestly a really far right representative that does not actually break with her party as often as you would think, being in such a not exactly blue district, but one that does kind of lean in other elections pretty blue at times. I mean, vote for Joe Biden, pretty sure definitely vote for Kamala Harris as well. And of course,
And Nate
Hillary
Douglas
Clinton.
came within 400 votes last time.
So she voted and co-sponsored the Charlie Kirk bills that would rename certain street designations at the campus of the University of Central Florida.
Your tax dollars at work, folks.
Charlie Kirk Memorial, highways or roadways, that type of thing. So that's one race I'm watching because Jane is a seriously progressive candidate. She's one with lots of experience. I mean, she's a educator, which is very important because, the faculty union at the University of Central Florida has been so broken up by the state because they intentionally want some censorship of our professors at UCF because of all the pro-Palestine organizing that has happened, the pro-DEI protests that have happened. So she's one that I really, want to win because I think that she has the ability to do it. One that doesn't get too mentioned is Representative David Smith in Seminole County is actually term limited. David Smith is actually a pretty moderate Republican, to be honest. He has voted actually against some bills to ingrain fetal personhood into our state laws, for example. So he's voted against some pretty bad bills. His seat is open. There has not been really a viable Democrat run yet for the seat. And it's something that's a very big opportunity. It's been listed previously as one of the most competitive seats in the state of Florida. So it's something that we can definitely
There's a young person who's actually a part of a teachers union. She's a public school teacher who filed recently, but I know more Democrats are going to be running in that race.
Because I mean, it is one on paper that we should be able to win again.
That's House District 38, I think.
Right. And one that some people do not really know about is, in my opinion, the exact perspective of fighting for this generational change in the Democratic Party. And it's the state house seat out in the Tampa Bay area where the state representative, Michelle Rayner, is stepping down to run for state senate against the state house minority leader, Ventress Driscoll. But of course, she's stepping down. She is on her third term, but she could theoretically still run for the state house seat that's now open. Who knows? But there is this younger activist named Keandra Darling, who I think is a millennial, a little bit kind of more progressive, I would say. I haven't personally had a conversation with her about some big issues, But she is running against this person named Wengay Newton, who has been on the St. Pete City Council for some years, off and on. He's run for quite a few offices and has lost. But there is a big rumor, and it's in Florida politics, so I don't feel too crazy to say it. State Senator Daryl Urson is actually considering a challenge to Keandra Darling to become a state representative. And Daryl Urson has honestly, I think, seriously been in Tallahassee since I've been alive. So, he's been in the state house, the state senate. He has decades of experience. But, Keandra is a new leader. And she does not have, lobbyist ties like Daryl does. Daryl Urson's general counsel, from what I've heard, his GC on his campaign is a Republican, actually. That is just a little bit more moderate. So that's the exact type of generational divide we do see in so many of our elections right now that is happening in Florida now.
And that generational divide is very much impacting how they govern, because now we are continually seeing these property tax cuts are perfect example of that, because what that would ultimately do, in addition to everything that we've mentioned before, is that it would pretty much exacerbate the wealth gap between those who already have property and those who are already well established in society and those who are just now getting going. And that hurts pretty much all our families here, because ultimately it may force us to leave because of just how unaffordable it could be to live in this state. Yeah. I think if you were to ask people, if you were to vote, would you vote for this property tax cut if it meant that it would price out your children and your children's children from living here?
Yeah.
That is a question that I really want to hear people ask before they go to the ballot and vote on whatever proposal they come up with.
Well, this is my closing question to you guys. Each of you, I want you all to answer. What is something that you want to see a candidate in 2026 speak to wholeheartedly? What is a policy or an issue that you want to see unapologetic messaging on?
This is difficult. I have a lot of issues. Maybe the environment is definitely one of my biggest issues, especially here in the state of Florida.
So if a candidate walked in here right now and they were to speak after they answer your question, of course, on Bernie Sanders' amendment, what would you ask them, and what would you want their response to be?
If it's a congressional or a Senate candidate, I would ask them about the Green New Deal, I think, and would they support that? Also, I think a big thing that I've noticed doing local government things would definitely be development. And if I'm talking to local candidates, I want to know, are you taking this developer money? Because that's what I've noticed in a lot of these local elections. You have to pay attention what mega developers are donating to the campaigns. And I think that would be a local issue that I would focus on for sure, that I've noticed.
Well, I would say and I'm going to take a little bit of creative ability with your question, just a little bit. But to end all genocides present in the globe. So that could mean abolishing ICE, because putting children in concentration camps like Liam is a part of genocide. Killing people on our streets for protesting against a genocide of our immigrant community, that's a part of genocide. Funding far-right governments overseas that slaughter children is genocide. Ending TPS and sending back our immigrant community members is a fixture of genocide. And of course, we've seen all the attacks on trans people over and over again in the country, and especially in Florida. That's, again, a part of genocide, of erasure. And we were talking earlier about HB 31, about Judea and Samaria. That's a part of genocide, and
covering up the truth is
right.
Yeah, an arm of,
and not to go back on, talking about Florida legislative session. I know we're trying to wrap up, but, there is a bill, HB 1119, to expand book bans in the state of Florida by removing the Miller test, which is a measure to rate credibility and cultural significance of books. That's a part of genocide.
Yeah.
So, and of course, bills about Judea and Samaria. all these things are part of genocide. There's a bill also as well to restrict gender affirming care for minors even more in the state of Florida. Again, that's a part of trans genocide.
Yeah.
So a candidate that will speak to people and say that this government federally and in the state is so engrossed in completing genocide of people to the point where it is almost honestly reminiscent of a modern Holocaust. And I feel empowered to say that because my grandma was a victim of the London Blitz, where she saw Nazi Germany directly harm people. We have family members that lost their lives on the Western Front against Nazi Germany. My last name is Polish. We face a lot of realization. So I just want a candidate that can speak to the fact that this fight against ICE, this fight for trans rights, this fight against, Zionism in this country is all a fight against genocide.
I agree.
I've been kind of thinking about it, and honestly, there is no one question I would ask an elected official, but if I were to condense it all, I would ask, what are you actually going to do in office? Genuinely, because you say all of these nice platitudes, all these nice policies, all these nice things on the campaign trail. It gives you nice quotes. It gives you good headlines. It gives you good pictures. You get to kiss your baby. You do all that fun stuff. But when it comes down to actually being in the room where it happens, to quote Aaron Burr, what exactly will you be doing when you have the power of the pen, the power of the purse, the power of the law on your side? Because as we have seen time and time and time again, elected officials on the Republican and Democratic sides, both sides fail ultimately and unequivocally to address the needs and concerns of everybody involved, except those who are powerful and who have enough money to convince them that their way is the right way. Meantime, folks like Xiani, Matt, myself, you even, are completely nickeled and dined on false promises and promises that just fundamentally do not get passed whatsoever. And I see this every day working in county government. Every time I have a discussion with my parents as well, it's like, what's the point anymore in trusting a government that does not fundamentally work for you? That's why all of these culture wars, all of this, like everything going on in our day and our day and age is built on distrust. That's why I've been harping on it the entire time this podcast has been going through. We've been doing this podcast because that is the fundamental weapon that the Trump administration, the DeSantis administration, every single establishment politician has been utilizing to great effect to prevent people like us from being in the same room talking about how to affect change. What strategies are we going to do in the short, medium, and long term? Why else do you think I would be getting an MPA? Because I want to change government. I want to make it work for all of us. So what are you going to do about it once you finally get your fucking votes? Yeah?
What are you going to do, Ethan? Are you going to run for office?
TBD on that, but for right now, my say is a no. Let's Xiani go first.
Every single one of you needs to run for office, period.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you.
Well, let Xiani go first. Be the trial run.
I would say mine is a mix of all of that, and because right now Florida is the front lines of the climate crisis, and I haven't heard a real resiliency plan. I think Andrew Yang is the first candidate I ever heard who said it's too late. We have to move people in off the coast. We have to have a real plan. And instead, what they're doing in Miami is like building walls and moving water from one place to the other and not really making any true plans to save people's lives, which in and of itself to me is a genocide because they're actively allowing people to move to Miami in buildings that we know are not structurally sound. That are sinking at an unprecedented rate.
And then we get Surfside in 2021 all over again.
Exactly.
And they're developing more and more there.
And they're developing more and more, even though we know they're sinking.
I've seen the cranes every day.
And just pumping the ground with concrete.
Yeah,
like,
that's what they're doing too. Yeah.
And there's no real plan, you know? It ties to everything that you all are saying. It ties to even the land use where our developers are rushing to build in our wildlife corridor because they know that those wealthy families are going to be displaced eventually and are going to have to come to Orlando. And
that's why there's a giant road cutting through some green place properties that eventually will lead to more development, even though it's all going to get flooded out in the long term.
And there's no real plan. I mean, we even see it now with the homeless. When there's a freeze, you know, I saw on Instagram, Zoran is like mobilizing the fleets to go out with different levels of therapists and healthcare workers to go out and collect people who are living in the cold to bring them into safety or into services. And yet our own government is just giving people free bus rides to possibly, if you live in the woods in Bithlo, you're not jumping on a bus to get to a shelter.
And, you know, one of my friends lives in Tampa. They were telling me about this incident at, you know, an office space that they know very well, where an unhoused resident of Tampa actually broke into the facility because he was so cold. And the best option they could give him was to get Baker Acted, because that was the only shelter that he could receive.
They had capacity for him.
Yeah, because the shelters closed about 2 days basically in advance of this freeze. And, you know, you're talking about how you see all these issues kind of as a form of genocide. And I mean, we don't talk too much about the unhoused community of Florida and how we're actually seriously, honestly doing a genocide of our unhoused people.
We're arresting them, you know?
By arresting them, by not giving them access, removing their encampments in forests, for example, where it's already super dangerous for them.
By not providing enough shelter so that they even could get out if they wanted to. There's too much overcrowding and just saying, oh, we made links free for the day. It's like, that's not enough.
Yeah. Meantime, we're burning more money just keeping them in our jails and in our hospitals when we really should be using that money to build housing, which is the effective long-term solution. But no, we just keep going back to the politically expedient.
Yeah, and is the answer to the crisis of the unhoused to basically make an ordinance where you actually financially negatively impact someone who can't pay for shelter?
Yeah.
Is that actually a good response?
Well, before I even go there, I mean, I'm just talking about in terms of like having a true resiliency plan for an emergency.
Right.
You know, like if Hurricane Dorian or Hurricane Melissa, both Category 5, Category 6, almost Category 7 based on the wind speed. There's not even a category for how fast Hurricane Melissa was moving. If it went down the spine of Florida, we would run out of food in 30 days.
Yeah.
We would have no way to import the amount of food to sustain our population that's here if I-4 was completely wrecked. And because of that, it really frustrates me to see us use our FEMA resources to build concentration camps in the Everglades instead of having a true resiliency plan.
Yep.
Just like we have to submit a comp plan, we should have to submit a resiliency plan to make sure that we know how to get information out in every language, to make sure that we know how to mobilize people with our fleets, to be able to call in fleets. And I mean, my uncle works at a major utility here in the state of Florida. And he said that there were some hurricanes where Puerto Rico and some of the Caribbean islands were hit. And typically they are ready to dispatch utility workers to these different islands from Florida. And this time around, they weren't called. The federal government didn't even call them.
Yeah. And
which means they were letting people die. I mean, people who might be on dialysis who need electricity in order to keep their motors running.
And that to me is just the cynicism of American society and the sheer distrust that we've ultimately placed in our government coming to a head at that point, because it hobbled our government so much that it is failing its most fundamental duty of protecting its own people.
It feels very intentional, like they want us to die.
They want us to distrust.
If our government is only working for the ultra rich, the ultra billionaires, and everyone else is just collateral damage,
right,
then the government will continue to feel like it's failing us. And this is where I believe in 2026, our elections have an opportunity to get real progressives elected, because progressives speak to that on the Democrat and Republican side.
But we also need to hold those progressives to account as well, not just with holding to their promises, but actually seeing them execute those plans as well. They need competent staff. They need organizers. They need people on the ground to get this done. Otherwise, they're just going to be dismissed.
They need you.
Exactly.
Because they can't do it if they don't have the dollars and if they don't have the people power. And if people are sitting at home saying, I want better leadership, everything is corrupt, and they don't have the support, then we're going to continue to get establishment Democrats, and we're going to continue to get these corrupt Republicans, and continue being mad at other Republicans that also just want to put food on the table and seeing them as our greater enemy instead of these mega developers, AI, industries and big players that are putting money into all of this, making us hate each other instead of helping us.
And I want to say this to sign us off, is that there's going to be a lot of people who may see us all here as naive or overly optimistic. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was very optimistic, and he led us through the Great Depression, and he led us through World War II. And he changed this country for the better in so many ways. Let's not make optimism something of an enemy or something to shun. Let's embrace it.
That's fair.
Big ideas, big ideas that are ambitious, but we have to be willing to pay for them. And this is where I hope we can reach our Republican and libertarian brothers and sisters, is that if we don't have transit, if we don't have property tax reform, if we don't have healthcare or childcare, it's because we're not willing to pay for it. We have to be willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that would actually pay off in the long run as well. It's been proven time and again that if you invest in those programs, you will see a return. It's a lot more worthwhile than, sending billions in arms to some foreign country.
Well, in signing off, I want to tell everyone who's watching, please invest time and energy in getting to know these young individuals, because they're the ones that I call when I have a question about what the hell is going on in our local politics. And I just want to thank you guys so much for stealing away from your own childhood and being this plugged in. You guys could be doing shots of tequila and dancing on a bar too. And instead, you're reading about bills that are taking away your freedoms every day. So thank you.
Honestly, it's a lot more fun to read that legislation, because at least I learn.
What a beautiful sign off there. Thank you. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.